now?
Yes, now it's okay,
Hello?
sir.
Hello? Can you hear
Hello?
me now?
Yes, yes, it's okay, sir.
Okay, let's go. Let's go before we drop, brothers and sisters. My name is Roy Anderson. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
You can proceed, sir.
I'm so I don't know how long the internet. I don't know how long the internet. As you may or may not know, I spent all of my life trying to. We are not teaching them how to think. We are not teaching them how to reason. And the basis, because of this, is that we've been raised on a consciousness that tells us the child inherits an ability. And we simply accept this ability. And we process them on this ability is, and so what the environment really means. And basically, we need to try to understand, first of all, that, of course, when the mother and father create the baby, the genes mix, meiosis, we all know about that. But what I've discovered is that not mixed, and these are carried as a normal human being. They're not interfered with by what we call genetic diversity. We might simply think that we can all laugh if we can understand the joke. We can all cry. These factors, but basically also our language skills. Okay. But also our language skills and our emotion are not decided by genetic diversity. The way that we scan information, the way that we listen or are attuned our senses to something is dependent on information. And also our ability to understand something and relate it to something that we've previously found interesting is again based upon our interest. And of course, the reality is that most children are not really interested in studying, even in university students have not decided how much effort they want to put into it. So what I've basically found out the smart students, the ones who know the answer, who are able to express themselves, this information is alive and relevant. They've kept the information alive by a sign. This information is active in their mind, so they can relate to it very quickly. They've tried, they put an effort in, and they are distracted by other factors. Some of them by boredom, some of them by questions of worry and some disconcern. So their ability to relate. And of course, the poor students, as I was a child in school, are so poor in their understanding, either because they came to school with poor language skills, and school works on language, and therefore they couldn't translate what was happening. So that's another factor. But basically what I'm saying is that as a teacher or as an educationalist, we confront a class of 35, 40 kids, 45 minutes, listen to an audio or PowerPoint presentation. We ask them to produce their value of this, and then we mark that value. We sit down and we, with a cup of coffee or whatever later, we evaluate presentation they've made, to the information, and number two, how adequately they could express themselves in language. They have a very simple demonstration. A very small child, maybe 5 years old. One child writes sun is yellow. Another child writes the sun is big, yellow, and hot. Will be able to gain a good mark because they can express themselves well. But a child who knows the answer and is very poor in language will not get a very high mark. And that will dissuade them from believing that their effort is worth anything. So they'll be drifting off. This, now they turn the music up in the restaurants, it's a bit difficult to keep going here. But basically, so what we need to do is to understand that the ability of children or of students is dependent upon the way they've been raised to see the world, been raised on. So when we are with children or students of any age, we have to get them to think more clearly about what they're doing. Now, we all know that we talk a lot about critical thinking in school. But the honest answer is that I don't really find that makes any difference at all. You think this happens or you think this happens. But that's not changing the way that the brain or the mind analyzes information as it moves through life and through the school system. So what we need to do, and very seriously, is to introduce a whole new subject into the curriculum called reasoning. Now, in the 1930s, there was a man called Benezet. He was a superintendent in American schools. And he noticed that students were learning mathematics simply by remote learning. They were memorizing. 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3 is 9, like this. And he wondered if he took mathematics, or this version of mathematics, out of the school syllabus and taught them reasoning skills, what effect that would happen. So he made an experiment with a number of schools and he took this out. He took mathematics out of the syllabus. And for the whole of the primary school education, children in a number of schools were not taught mathematics. Instead, they were taught reasoning skills, how to think and how to discuss and to share thoughts and develop language skills. And what he found out was that when these students went on to higher education, in the first year, they were performing better in mathematics than students who'd spent the past 5 years doing mathematics, because they'd learned to think about what they were doing. If you go to any, and of course now the system's disappeared from the screen, just one moment, gentlemen. Okay, we go. If you go to any psychology book, it will tell you that intelligence testing began with Alfred Binet in France in 1905. But this is wrong. Of course, intelligence at school is very political. And the intelligence testing system is hidden under this idea of a gentle French professor, but in reality is a very pragmatic political machine designed by the American educational system. But so any reference that you may hear that Alfred Binet was the inventor of intelligence testing is wrong. The intelligence testing actually began by Stein in 1912 in Germany, and that was taken over by Goddard and Tim in America, and then became, as we know it is today. But Binet, who believed that you cannot measure intelligence, and you can't. I've proven you can't measure intelligence. But what Binet said, and I'll quote here, is that what children should learn first is not the subjects ordinarily taught, for example, maths, history, whatever. They should be given lessons of will, of attention, of mental discipline, before exercises in grammar. They need to be exercised in mental orthopedics. In a word, they must learn how to learn. And now Binet wrote that over 100 years ago, and it's been completely ignored because the educational system that we have in the world hasn't changed since school system began over 150 years ago. It is to produce two qualities of citizen, the manager and the managed. Now, the child who goes to general school is not designed to think too much because society doesn't want the citizen to think too much. The general citizen is designed to follow the instructions of the managers and to follow the platitudes of the politicians. This is the citizen is. They're designed to be stupid. You may know that the book is called Dumbing Down in America, where the author very easily explains how children are not taught how to reason, they're not taught how to think.
Sir Roy, would you like to little bit raise your voice, because some of the participants are unable to listen you properly. Little bit raise your voice.
Okay, brother. Okay. It's just that I'm trying not to disturb other people here and the rest. Okay. Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's okay.
Can you hear me now?
And we also want to zoom your camera.
Okay.
Yes, now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then. Oh, okay. Okay. So we were talking about. Yeah. So we know that, of course, children are naturally inquisitive. Children are geniuses. And NASA did a very interesting study. They took 1,600 children and they gave them questions. And what they found out, at the age of 4, 98% of these children gave genius answers. The responses were like Einstein. They were amazing responses. What was very interesting is that 5 years after school, this 98% had dropped to 30%. 1,600 children left school, only 2% still had a genius quality. Question is, what are we doing wrong? The problem here is that school education works on rules. And if the children don't understand how to use those rules, they can become timid, they become frightened, they become nervous of getting it wrong. So the whole idea of the school system is to reduce creativity because it evaluates students on how competent they're the rules. So in a sense, to combat that, we have to educate our children to know the rules of mathematics and of language competently. And only when they know those competently, then will they have the confidence to be creative. So what we are saying here really is that after Benezet found out that children learn better by reasoning, his work was very profoundly important, but it was ignored by the American machinery because they didn't want children to think too much. That was actually taken up by Lippmann, for example, children's books where children read a story and the story stimulated their reasoning capability. But the whole point here is not about school, it is about the future citizen. And this is what drives me, is that we are failing globally to prepare the child that they will work in. Now, we all know that artificial intelligence is changing our world. But unfortunately, we don't understand how much it is, because it's frighteningly so. You know, we go to work, we do our job, we're tired, we go home, we eat our dinner, we relax with our family, we watch the TV, and we go to the next day. Day by day, we move through our world. But the world is changing very fast and very silently. And so artificial intelligence is taking more and more responsibility for the works and for the social opportunities of the individual. We are falling under this artificial intelligence far more than we realize. You only have to go to listen to some of the TED Talks to find out how quickly and how dangerously artificial intelligence is taking over. So all my life now is dedicated to meeting such people like you and other people to try to explain that we need a new model citizen. We need a new citizen now, one who doesn't listen to the platitudes of politicians, who doesn't accept the junk they're fed on the television or the newspaper, but questions. Is it true? Where is the source of the information I'm being fed? Now, to do that, we need to teach children how to reason in school. So while we hear the word critical thinking, what does it really mean? Well, it means to think critically. And this very simply means stop and think. So for all the people here who are educationists and parents, try to consider raising your students and your children with a simple word: stop and lessons. So, for example, before they enter, about what opportunity noisy and distracting for other children. Stop and think. How are they hindering when they're given a question? Stop and think. What is the best way I can answer this question? Stop and think. How can I improve this? In what ways can I improve this? How can I, and of course, a social responsibility. Teacher, to stop and think, how is my behavior hindering or assisting the teacher? And of course, most importantly, is to raise the children on awareness not to hurt other children, either verbally. And so to stop and think, before what harm will I really do to them? And of course, the reality is that life always brings back what you give out. So if you give hurtful remarks, it'll come back manyfold to you. So we need to raise our children, as Benizet demonstrated, with lessons of reason, where teachers discuss with children and develop their language skills. You know, it's very disturbing for me when I go to countries and I find, you know, as you may know, I spent 1 month in Algeria, 5 months in Nepal, 2 months in India, 1 month in Kashmir, and now I'm in Turkey. And we are teaching them just to accept information, to memorize it and reproduce it. And the Indian educational system demands that, which again explains the kind of citizen that they want. A citizen. So in this regard, all I can say is that it's important that we consider how we can persons we interact with, value of stop and think. Stop and think. Is this information correct? What is the source of this information? Now, I do a very good lesson on critical thinking with children, where I explain to them that the two pillars, because there's the reality. I'm explaining to them that what they think is true actually can be proven not to be so. And it's a good demonstration of information. And so we need to, and the best way of doing this is to gain confidence, very quiet and very shy. And so paste. It's the purpose. Sorry, just 1 second. I have to interrupt somebody. Just 1 second. It's called, what was that? me. What was I up to? I got distracted. Imran, what was the last? Hello?
Yes, yes.
Imran, what was the last thing I said? I've forgotten. Can anybody help me? What was the last thing I said?
Actually, sir, a little bit it was dissertation, so I'm unable to concentrate. Okay, you can continue.
You were talking about that we need to work on critical thinking. You're talking about critical thinking. Mr. Imran, can you hear me, please?
Yes, yes. It was like this.
The last thing he is asking that he was talking about critical thinking.
Yes, it was like this. Hello? I think Mr. Roy is facing some signal issue. Yes. Galaxy Tab, you want to ask something?
4 altogether, and each student explains. Where each student then explains well, I found this and I think for this reason. So they're developing language skills. This is what's so important. The ability to make dialogue and to present and to defend their arguments, defend their thoughts. This is what's necessary. And then having shared those thoughts according to their language capability. So that's one way of trying to develop language skills. But in a basic sense, we have to find ways within our class structure to get our children to debate more, to feel not frightened of debating, to be able to stand up in the class and say, I don't think this is right. I role play, I like to do theatre, to give them this confidence of standing up and fun. And everything should always be fun. And then, of course, to read something out to the rest of the class, so that again and again, through experience, they develop this competence to explain their mind. And so this is the key issue I'm thinking of here. Is number one, to teach them to stop and to think and not just accept information in any form it takes. And then to develop their confidence to explain their mind by language, by debating. And of course, some children will be have more confidence than others. But our job is to raise the confidence of all of them, because they will all be citizens of the future. Well, I once read a paper by Jonathan Barrow many years ago, about 20 years ago, and he said that there's two kinds of thinking processes that are wrong. One is my side, and the other is overgeneralization. Now, my side bias means that I will only agree with what my thoughts are, and I will not give consideration to other people's thoughts. You see, what happens is that once we think of something, we put our identity to it and it becomes a part of us. And then if we are talking with other people and they disagree with us, we get hurt. We feel that it's an emotional attack on us. So we defend our argument without openly rationalizing what the other people are saying. So this is a skill we need to overcome. And overgeneralization means that they see things too broadly and don't accept it, don't analyze what they're really looking at. These are really all to say here, except I want to tell you something. I was very interested in raising children to be better human beings for the future. And I was very interested, I am devoted my life to discussing with people such as yourselves, how can we do this? How can we overcome the educational system which doesn't want this to happen? How can we prepare our children with minds that are active, are able to have confidence to express themselves and to stand up and say, this is not right? How can we individually do this in our countries? But you see, this is all I was really thinking about until I was in Kathmandu. Now, I went to Kathmandu in the end of January. I was in Nepal for 5 months. Most of it spent in Kathmandu. And if you go to my Facebook, you'll see the video that I present about. I explain that in Kathmandu is the worst in the world. Every day I walk in smog and pollution that sometimes I see more than 20 feet in front of me. And I was always very, very worried about the children growing up in this pollution because, of course, it changes their RNA. The whole body is being polluted like this. And every day I would come home and the toxic waste was in my eyes, my ear, and my hair was beginning to fall out. And I got to the stage where, oh my God, I really am losing my hair. So I did some transplant here to repair the damage the pollution had done to my head. But it really made me realize that we are ignoring the terrible way our planet is going. Again, we are apathetic to all that's happening. And if you've watched Al Gore's movie, An Indisputable Truth, you'll know that global warming is a very, very serious problem. And that in itself is going to cause, of course, ice melts, water level rises. And as I explain in my Facebook posts, as the water level rises, it will flood lowlands. But at the same time, the heat is melting the glaciers. And at 40% of the world's population take their drinking water from mountain areas. And these are fed by glaciers. So when the glaciers have gone, and they are going, there will be no drinking water for these people. So they'll move down time as the people moving up. And so we're going to face in, I don't know, half a century, but everything happens so fast. So we're having people moving this way and people moving this way. It's going to be so much arguing and huge social problems. And we need a citizen of the future with patience, with tolerance, with empathy, with compassion. Now, we all have these naturally, but we need to develop them more. Confucius said 2,500 years ago. So we need to raise our children to be more kinder with each other, more patient, more tolerance, so that they are, so that they have the chance of holding democracy. Because the citizen model that we're producing today, we lose that democracy in the future when artificial intelligence says these people, therefore we take this away from them. It's obvious. It's happening now. You know it's happening now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sir Roy. Now we have a question answer session. First of all, I would like to request our participant, they should introduce themselves, and then if you have any question, you can ask Mr. Roy. Yes, I think we have Huma Kirmani from Karachi.
Yes.
Huma Kirmani?
Hello.
Yes. You can introduce yourself in the session.
Hello.
And then yes. You may proceed.
Roy, hello, Roy Anderson. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, ma'am.
We can hear you.
Hello. Okay. I'm Huma Kirmani. Basically, I'm an educationist and working as an academic head at Army Public School, Cambridge campus, Huleed, Kent. Uh, and I'm also an author. I have written many books. You were talking about global warming. So don't you think so that the dispension of so many weapons in the wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and Kashmir, that's lead us to the highest peak of that global warming because it's creating, the I think so that
I don't.
so many bombs.
Yeah, that's, yeah, of course. This is this is very interesting. I know about that. It's very true. Yeah, this is a very, very good point. It's a very, very good point. These this combination of these explosions obviously generate a heat, and that heat and energy, of course, is always transferred. It's never lost. Yeah, this is a very, very good point. It's a very, very good point. How significant it is in relation to the the pollution. But it's certainly an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, because you see that they are not ozone friendly. The explosions, the bombs, and weapons, and all that. And the ozone black hole is increasing in size day by day, which is enhancing global warming all over the world.
Yes, I think Huma Kirmani raised a very good point because
Yeah,
the
it's
nuclear,
very true.
yeah,
Please.
the nuclear energy competition and the nuclear explosive create a very bad environmental hazards to all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
This is very
And
true. Yeah, I never thought about that, but the lady's completely right. Well done.
Yes.
Well done. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the
thank
politicians
you.
aren't interested. But it's a very good point. I want to explain that my eldest daughter lives in Australia in an island called Tasmania. And above
Mhm.
Tasmania in the ionosphere. And so the light is very strong. And I visited her 2 years ago, and it was so bright, it really hurt my eyes. The light intensity was too much for my eyes. It was really hurtful. And we are destroying our life, hence the planet. This is a very good point, what you say about explosions in whatever form. And certainly this nuclear testing, it's a very, very...
Thank you. This is what I have been thinking about because when Pakistan did its first nuclear
famous.
explosion in Chaghi in Balochistan, you know that for many years it remained dry. There was no harvest, no rain poured down there. So I think that if we want to make if technology has turned the world into a global village, so we should abide by the rules. Let's live and let live. So that you see, I think I hardly ever heard that there is a heat wave in England, but a
So
couple of months ago,
I, I,
I heard.
I have a question for you. I have a
Yeah,
question for you. I
all
totally,
right.
totally, I totally agree with what you say. I totally agree with what you're saying. I was watching the Al Gore's movie weeks ago, An Indisputable Truth, where he explains how global warming is increasing. And he explains the point that it's about capitalism and environment. They are money making and the environment. But the making their money about having a place to survive and to live. These people who are really controlling our life and the life of our children, they can't understand that they are destroying the planet and the opportunities of their children to survive. It's just money, just making money. I mean, I don't know anything about politics, but from what I understand is that the current president of America is accelerating the carbon rate and all these problems that are coming through the environment.
Right.
It doesn't appear to be doing anything to stop it. But anyway, but it's what you say is totally right. Totally right. I love what you say. You're right. You're right.
We have Salma Niazi, a research scholar. Salma Niazi, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Salma Niazi from Karachi, Pakistan. It's a very good session. I enjoyed a lot. Okay. As I am a lecturer, I am teaching in a university. So I emphasize on the lesson planning of a teacher. But it is also very important. Is that how to students to participate in the class. Trouble make students in the classroom. How to handle all these types of students?
I think she means to say how to handle the discipline matter in the classroom.
How to handle what? How to handle what?
Discipline matter. Like,
sorry, how to handle what?
Yeah.
The students who are problems in the
very important. I was in one class in Kashmir, and the children, how old were they? About 10 years old. They were so disruptive, so noisy. It was disgraceful. What I said to the principal is that, look, we have to adopt the French method here, and this is the innocent approach, because you just can't shout. You can't shout at this class. You can't say be quiet or shut up, because they just wasted time. So what I suggested to the principal was that all the parents would be notified that in, for example, 1 week's time, the whole class would be kept behind the sign. So again, they would be put in for another 2 hours, and so on until they learn to be quiet. And the idea here is that by punishing the innocent control the guilty, because they'll say to their friends, you know, be quiet, or we'll do something to you because you're making a noise and we're suffering for it. And I think,
Mr. Rai, would you like to repeat? Would you like to repeat, because there was some dissertation? Would you like to repeat the same?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I was in one school in Kashmir, and I was invited into a class of 10-year-old children, and they were so noisy. It was impossible for the teacher to work. And we tried the normal sort of shut up and would be quiet. It didn't work. It was just, they were animals. They were totally out of control. And so I said to the principal that what we need to do here in order to control the guilty. So I suggested that all the parents be notified that in 1 week's time, the whole class will remain behind in school for 2 or 3 hours. And in this period, there must be complete silence, complete and utter silence. And there isn't any sense, then the punishment will be again repeated and repeated and repeated. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And however long it takes, they will learn to be quiet. And they will punish, the innocent ones will punish the guilty ones by whatever means, so that they learn to cooperate. And this is another point here. Children who are disruptive in the class are not thinkers. So it's not a social movement. It's not a collective movement. It's an individual movement. And the idea here, of course, is to get the class to work together. And so one of the things I did in Kashmir were children, they were children, into groups of 3. And I explained that these 3 help each other. So if one doesn't understand, the other 2 can help them. And if 3 in the whole class works together, this collective movement, this collective mind working together helped them a lot. One interesting point here was that I was invited to another school in Kashmir, and I have to tell you, large children emotionally disturbed, terribly emotionally disturbed by the stress that they live under, this occupation. It's really disturbing to see children like this. And I was introduced to a whole class who are being silly, and the teachers are just shouting at them because they're being silly. When I met these children individually, I understood they have so much pain because of the keep up with the lessons. So they don't understand the lessons, therefore they're bored, and because they're bored, they behave silly. So we have to consider if we are talking about 1 or 2 individuals who are disruptive, or if we have a large number, then we suggest something like I mentioned to you, keep the whole class behind for 2 or 3 hours in complete silence. I lived in Japan for 9 years, and I was watching 5-year-olds leave, and what I noticed that all the children had to sit in complete silence for something like hours, but they'd been prepared for that. And I asked my friend, why are these children being so quiet? And she said to me, they are being taught to be considerate. They're drilled in consideration for each other. So, okay, so if the class is out of order, then the whole class is punished. If it's an individual factor, then the individuals should be taught to, so the teacher should talk to the individuals and disrupting the opportunities of others. Why do they understand? Are they lost? Are they bored? And if they are, and they're normally not. Hello? Okay. And put a bad
we have Mr. Farooq from Oxford University, a well-known motivational speaker and researcher. Mr. Farooq, would you like to say something?
What's happening? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
I wanted to talk about the point that you have discussed about critical thinking.
Okay.
Because when we talk about the critical thinking, it means that every child has to think on his own. But if we go through the curriculum that we are following in almost all the countries of the world, I don't know much about the other, but especially when I'm talking about Pakistan, or even the textbooks or the curriculum or the material that is there to study in the schools is of the same class, that always hinders critical thinking and the creativity among the students. Because right from the start, when we start making them learn that A is for apple, so where comes the critical thinking, or where comes the creativity in the child? So that's what I wanted to want you to throw light, that how come that we can have a diverse sort of a curriculum that can help critical thinking and creativity in a student right from day one, as soon as he is going to be in the school, rather than the school is going to cut down creativity right from the very first day when he is not allowed to say anything other than the apple starting with A.
Yeah. This is what I. This is the point I try to make. You know, the first book I wrote was called "The Illusion of Education." It explains, as I mentioned to you, society doesn't want the general citizen to think, so children are not taught how to think. So the school system is designed not to encourage this rational thinking. It's a political action that we don't see, we don't recognize. To overcome that, we, as I mentioned, we need to introduce a subject about reasoning, as Benezet did. If we don't have the flexibility to do that, then as individuals, we need to improvise as much as we can. And the only way that we can really effectively do that is to drill the children to stop and think, and have activity games about that, stop and think, and make it into quizzes and games. Of course, the more fun it is, the more interested they are, and the more actively they participate. But to me, thinking critically means, very simply, stop and think. Whatever you're doing, don't just assume it's correct and move through it. Stop and think. Stop and think. And you can invent many aims on that practice.
But would you please, I hope you have a good eye on the Pakistani education and examination system, rather, that by the end of the day, the students, those who are going to appear in BISC or in a university exam, especially if I talk about grade 10 exam, even if it is an O-level exams of Cambridge, the students got here prepared that they are used to cram even the questions, like the subjects of literature like Islamiyat or Pakistan studies or even biology, physics and chemistry. They have multiple sort of practices to overcome or to get good grades in the examination, especially that is particular in Pakistani education examination system. I'm talking up to grade 10. So how come a critical thinker, the one, because the schools like the English medium schools like City School, Beacon House, Frobbles, these sort of schools, they are working on these terms and they are following the Cambridge curriculum as well. And we have all these sort of things. But the point comes when they have to appear in the examination. They are not going to opt for or absorb or accept any answer other than that is written in their handbook or particularly in the textbook. How to deal with that?
I found that in India, where, like, as I mentioned before, the student is evaluated on how much they memorized.
Yes.
What was in the text.
Yeah, that's what's going on.
I think we have to follow the system because the child is being assessed and evaluated on the system, even if we know the system is wrong. And somehow within that, we have to incorporate games of reasoning. So, for example, if the child is being evaluated in an examination how much they memorize, well, then they've got to memorize it. That's it. But outside of that, they can also learn to think more critically about information. We have to follow the system, but at the same way, we have to prepare them to overcome the system. I've given some insights into that, and as I've been talking, we can. But I don't actually see that they compound each other. I see them running in parallel. The children have to learn to memorize information. That's it. We can't argue with that because that's the way the system works. But beyond that, we can still help them to be critical of information. We can still teach them about rationalizing and considering where information. When they go to Google or they do their resource, they find what with them and assignment have to go to the sources to select information. Of course, they'll go to Google, and many of the students will accept the first page that comes up. They won't take a number of pages and to compare them, which is what we need them to do.
You're really right about it. That's what we are trying to. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. One point I'd like to mention here, if may. I'm always hoping that I'll be able to come to Pakistan, but what I found out was that if the gentleman is, I considered, what do I normally do? Well, I would give textbooks out. I would ask the children to work their way, do the questions, give me their assessment on the questions, and I would then evaluate it. But what was I really evaluating? And I thought, well, the student's competence to understand the text will be dependent upon how familiar they are with the previous pages, the previous lessons, so they understand it. Because the textbook was written by one mind, and if the child comes from a very different language. So I said, okay, to myself, let's take the textbook out of the lesson, and I, as the teacher, would familiarize myself with the textbook pages. And then I would highlight the significant information and present it in a fun, highly interactive, all the students, every single student knows those.
We have Hussein from Morocco. Hussein is the co-founder of Global Bus Trainer Academy Morocco. Hussein, would you like to say something?
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I was a bit late because of some technical problems.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
It's okay, Hussein. First of all, little bit introduce yourself.
I can hear you now.
We welcome you in the Roy Anderson session.
Thank you. I'm Hussein QASSERRAS. I'm the Global Bus co-founder and the project manager as well. I have been coaching future teachers since 2008. And I would like here to learn and to share some experiences that we have had all with the children. Here in Morocco, maybe it's the same situation in all developing countries. One of the problems that we as teachers face when teaching children is the number of students. We mean large classes. This is number one.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
The line dropped off. The only thing that I heard was exactly what I tried to overcome. As I was explaining, for the teacher, okay, learn what's in the textbook. Of those pages, page 5 to 7 or whatever it is, identify with the key points. Now, I was teaching gravity to one class, and it's rubbish. And I presented that information in a fun, highly interactive way so that every single student knew that, learned it. And then we had about 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, I asked them to write their assignment. And then I went around individually helping each student, put a comma here, don't have this as a capital letter, try this adjective instead of this one, bit by bit. So I was able to fine-tune, develop their language skills. So over a period of the year, I can raise the language skills of the whole class up. And that means that they can present themselves better, so they get marked better. And because they all understood the meaning of the lesson, they all had the same ammunition. Incidentally, I've got people trying to get me to come to Morocco, and I would love to come. So what I found out was that it doesn't matter the size of the class. It depends how you share the information. So I found that in Kashmir, I was very large classes, 50 kids in a class. And I found the same technique is to, as I explained to you, identify with the information, select key elements, and teach that in a very fun, highly interactive manner, which I would love to come and demonstrate, and then help each child to develop their language skills. I'll give you a point here. We tell the children to write, when they write an essay, to write an introduction, the main text, and the conclusion. I was with a class of 15-year-olds in Nepal, and I explained to them, please write 2 lines introduction, 8 lines main text, and 2 lines conclusion, because I wanted to condense this. As I walked around, I found that only 2% understood what an introduction actually meant. Now, they'd all been told write the introduction, but they didn't understand what it meant. So I had to teach them. So brother, in my experience, it doesn't matter if you have a large class, 50, 60, 70, it's how you present the information to them. And I would love to come and show you how to do that. Anyway, but then the signal broke off and I didn't hear what else you said. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You can repeat another question.
Yeah, so sorry, the phone battery died. Now it's okay. I totally agree with you that it's not a matter of teaching large classes or small classes, but the most important is how a teacher manages teaching students by using various methods, various techniques, activities, so as to motivate and engage students. Here, when we talk about some developing countries, another obstacle that may teachers face is teaching students with different levels. So, for example, you can, here in the high school, you may teach students belonging to different levels. Beginners, intermediate, upper intermediate, belonging to the same class. So this is one of the challenges that Moroccan public school teachers face when dealing with mixed abilities, mixed levels. Okay.
Yeah, I found that true in Kashmir. I found very distinct abilities within the class. And what I did was that I put the better performers at the top to be able to have this confidence. There'll be many of them who are lost. But I try to explain, we are working as a system. I promote help the worst, and the worst are more responsible to the rest of the class to keep up and to put the effort and the help they need. And of course, we need the parents in this. Parents are fundamental to this. We can't exclude them. Parents don't understand the problems we've got. They just believe that we can solve all the problems. We need to educate parents about their responsibility to get them actively involved in the learning.
Yes, I would like to add something more. Like I personally observed that sitting arrangement can also play a very important role in controlling the class, especially if you the sitting arrangement of the class. A teacher can easily access to those students who are just messing the class, and even they can handle this situation. So what you can say, what you want to share about this, like classroom
Well,
arrangement?
wait a minute. Wait a minute. Imran, just one second. Just one second. I want to show you. I want to show something here. So just one moment, brother.
Yeah.
If I can find out how to screen share, I'll show you what I do here. But this is very important. The point you raise. Just let me try to find. I think this is okay. 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 I'm going to try the screen share if I can. Can everybody see that photograph of the,
Yeah.
teachers?
Yes.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see.
Can everybody see the photograph of the teachers? This is normally, okay. This is normally a classroom design in rows. But the problem with a row is that you can't reach you can't. Now this is like L, and because there are so many, we've in along the rows. So the teacher now has the opportunity to do two things. When she's talking, she can see directly into the eyes of each student to know how effective they are in teaching. Now this is fundamental, because when the children are in rows, then the teacher's just broadcasting information. They just broadcast. They assume everybody can lie to the student. Very important, because as I explained to you before, normally this is the end of the lesson, the student's assignment. The teacher then sits down in the staff room, marks it, and gives papers. And that's completely standard marks, or they're not interested to study them. But this way, the teacher can go along during the last 20 minutes and help each child individually to raise their language skills, which is what it's all about. And these young men here, they were all totally emotionally destroyed because of the pressures under which they lived. When I got close enough, they were crying. And it was the same with some of these girls. This was the normal classroom layout, in the rows. And this is totally ineffective. I'm sorry. But you see here that by changing the rows, even though it was very compact, I mean, there was hardly any room, but we did it. And this way, the teacher covers every single student. And please, amazing difference. Okay. Well, it's getting too personal. But I think I'm going to stop sharing this call. Okay. So,
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's very important. It's very important for the school director, for the school principal, to look at the classrooms, and he should regularly guide his staff, okay, or her staff, okay, to make a proper arrangement in which the teacher can be regularly access to all the students. So I think as a school director, school principal, this is his moral responsibility to help the teacher, because majority of the teachers, they are hesitant to change the school the shape of the class and everything. But if it is regular support from the school administration, so I think it is very helpful for the teacher also.
Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions? May I please invite you? You know, if you go to quite a lot of videos, but look at the ones. Let's talk about motivating. Let's talk about schools. Let's talk. Please go and please join me and Imran on the website. Sorry, my ANDERSEN education, and with my great friend.
You can write, sir, on the screen.
Imran, done. I'd love to.
Yeah, I'm going to create one WhatsApp group also, in which you will be added, and you can time to time you can share your ideas, your new latest videos. So we will add other members also.
See. Does anybody have any more questions? I thought to show.
Yes, anybody want to ask something?
Hello?
I think we should conclude the session.
Okay.
Salman Niazi, do you have any question? Mr. Farooq?
I do.
Thank you very much. It was really nice indeed, and nice sharing of the knowledge. Thank you very much, Mr. Tony. And thank you, Mr. Imran. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
God bless you too. Thank you. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Allah.